Hello, my name is Alex Sanfilippo, and I'm excited to quickly run you through my entire podcast SOP, the standard operating procedure for the Creating a Brand podcast. Now, this has had a lot of iterations, and I say that because I actually launched the podcast on July 2nd, 2019. And since then, it's obviously grown, and then for a while, it actually shrank, like what my SOP was. And that's because I just continue to find the best practices for my show. So I say that as a disclaimer. What works for me may not work for you. So you don't have to have this exact SOP, but I do recommend using it as a framework because most of this stuff is things that are really going to help your podcast do well. And you can just tweak the things along the way that you say just really don't work. And I'll use some examples throughout. If you're interested in checking out my show, you can go to creatingabrand.com. All right, so I'm going to quickly run into a little bit more details about the show. First off, it's in the entrepreneurship category. And when I launched it, was actually featured in entrepreneurship, business, and education for 8 weeks in the new and noteworthy section of Apple Podcast. And it did really well as an entrepreneurship podcast, and it still continues to do exceptionally well and grow every single month. It's an interview format. Occasionally, I will do a solo episode, which I have a different SOP for. But in general, almost every single episode is going to be an interview of some sort. And the editing level that I do with this thing is standard, I'd say. There's nothing fancy. I do go back and add an intro and outro, which has my music, and then I add a mid-roll. And that's why I put it as like a standard editing level. I'm not going through and like taking out all the ums. My guest recently coughed in the episode, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to leave it in there because it wasn't like super loud. And you're like, whoa, it wasn't that type of thing. So I was just like, you know what, I'm going to leave it here. So I really don't do a lot of editing other than the fact that I record the intro and outro separately from the episode. So I'm not like asking the guest about themselves. We jump straight into the content, and I just record basically a 1-minute intro and about a 30-second outro at the end. And I'm releasing 2 episodes per week right now. And that could change at any time, right? So I have 29 tasks on my SOP. So my standard operating procedure has 29 different things. There's 3 team members. There's me and 2 other people that are running this. They are mostly on the administrative side and the social media side, which I'll get into. We use 8 external tools total, which I'll cover throughout this. And I average the spend per episode, if I include paying the staff, the different subscriptions we have for the tools and stuff like that, it comes out to be about $76.55 per episode. And that's about what we're paying. Some people will pay less, but most people will actually pay more, especially at the size of a podcast that we have. So here we go. This is my SOP, my standard operating procedure for the Creating a Brand podcast. And let me go ahead and jump into this here. So step number 1, the first thing that I do is actually find my ideal guest. And I actually use podmatch.com for this now. I used to go all over the place. I was using like LinkedIn and Facebook groups and Instagram. I mean, I was using all these places, and it was terrible. It was just not good. So I started just going to podmatch.com because it'll automatically match me to people that are a fit for what I say I'm looking for. So I describe my next ideal guest, and it says, here's some people that might be good. So that's made the whole process very simple and saved a lot of time. So if you're not on podmatch.com, check that out. Full disclaimer, I also own that company. So, but I built it because it was a solution that was needed, and it's me, and as I'm recording, it's about 18 or maybe 19,000 other people using it as well. So anyway, that's where I find my guest. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the topic. And this is really important because I always have to have my audience in mind. So I'm thinking of my avatar, making sure that who I'm bringing on is going to be the best fit for them. That it's not the most famous person, but it's the person who can really bring the best information on any given topic that I think is really important for my avatar. And then along with that, right before I even start, like as soon as I decide on a guest, I'm going to start making a tentative title. I'm going to try to figure something out that works. I'm also going to pick when I want to release it. So the reason that's important for me is I don't want to have 2 weeks in a row that are on the same topic. I want to try to space those out a little bit so there's some filter and some buffer between us all just like getting burnt out on one given topic. Next up, I schedule the interview with the guest, and I use Squadcast and Google Calendar. So I have like a template that I use. It's the same thing I read every single time, basically, that goes into the Google Calendar, explains the audience, explains the length of the show. It's fairly short, but basically there's no questions needed from the guest as to like, oh, shoot, is this audio or video? Oh, it says that. Who's the audience? It says that. How long will this go for? It says that, right? And then I use Squadcast as how I'm actually doing the recording because it gives, I think, the best audio quality that you can record online. So for remote interviews. And so those are the things that I'm actually doing. I schedule out with the guest. That's put straight into the actual calendar invitation as the location. So it makes the whole thing really simple for them. All right, next up, and this is something my team always asks me for. If they're watching this, they're like, Alex, you still never do this. I am supposed to ask for 3 HD photos of the guest and a copy of their book if they have that, which I always do that, but the photos are where I struggle, my team will tell you. But anyway, I'm supposed to do that, and the reason for that is because we want to use images for social media, and we find that 3 is a good number to have, so we can kind of have some different images, not all exactly the same. Plus, sometimes we can only use 1 or 2 of them because sometimes they're just not great for adding words and things like that to them. So it's really important that you ask for this up front because you don't want to be a day before the release like I have been before where we still don't have those images and my team's screaming. So anyway, maybe I'll delegate that at some point. Thankfully, Podcast SOP allows me to schedule whose task is, who's responsible for each task. Maybe this will be theirs moving forward. So anyway, moving right along, I digress. The next is the interview preparation. Now, this is what's really separated my show apart from many others and why it's had so much success. And I say this as humbly as I can, but I'm a good host. And it's not because I ask the best questions or I'm the most well-spoken, as you can tell from this. Like I talk fast and I stumble over my words a little bit, but that's fine. What I'm really good at doing is I read their entire book. So if I'm going to talk about a book that they have coming out, I'm going to get a galley of it. I'm going to read the whole thing all the way through, and then I'm going to go listen to them on other podcasts. I'm going to watch them on YouTube, or if they've done any speeches on their website or anything like that and they have that, I'm going to go through that. And then I'm going to do some background research. I'm going to take a look at them as an individual, what they like, what they don't like. I learn all these things. I put about 30 hours of work into each interview before it's actually happening. That way I am completely prepared. Sometimes I know these people as well as they know themselves, it seems. But again, this is what has separated my podcast, and I've devoted a lot of time to becoming a better host, and it's all through this interview preparation. So think about that. It's really important. And the next thing we do is we record the interview via Squadcast, and then when it's done, we immediately download the high definition, the WAV or WAV or whatever, those files in separate track form. That way, again, I get the best of the best audio. So right when we're done, I download that, I put it on my desktop. Even if I'm going to close my laptop or my computer then and take a step back and go do something else for a little bit, I want to make sure I have them downloaded just because I guess you never know, right? And then the next thing I do is I immediately send a short thank you to the guest. So something I noticed that a lot of hosts do, it's like, hey, thanks for being on the show. And then that's it. You never hear from them again. So all you do is sometimes I wait 10, 15 minutes, or if I take my break, it's when I come back. I just quickly say, hey, thanks again for being on the show. I'm really excited to be editing it and to get it out to the world and stuff like that. And I'll follow up with you later type of thing. But just like a short appreciation because they did give me their time. So it's always a really nice thing to do. And it builds a little bit of a relationship with your guest. All right, next thing is to post a short update on social media about getting to record with that guest. So this is not this doesn't have images usually. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it has me holding a copy of the book. I'll do a little selfie thing, right? So it'll have something like that. But the whole point is to build some excitement about it because maybe somebody knows that guest. So I'll tag them in social media and be like, just got to record with so-and-so. It was a really great episode. Looking forward to sharing it in a few weeks. Just something like that, and people usually will kind of engage with it. Sometimes the guest will as well. Again, building that rapport and also helping me get some people excited about the episode getting released. All right, next. This is when I actually edit the episode in Pro Tools. Now, some people sub this out. I actually really enjoy editing. I'm probably not the best at it, but it's a fun therapeutic thing for me. So I have not subbed that out. So I use Pro Tools, and it's been a fun system to learn. I've got some friends that use it and help me when I need help. But for the most part, I've kind of got it figured out at this point. I have templates and stuff like that that's made the whole process really simple. Even the intro and outro, where they go, I put the episode in the middle, I add those audios as well, and I'm done. So when I write and record those intros, I want them to be really sharp. So again, it's less than a minute on the intro, as I mentioned early on in this conversation. And at the end, it's about 30 seconds. And I use a program called Record Pad, and I just load that straight into Pro Tools when I'm done, and then I'm good to go. Again, this is a lot of fun. It takes a little time to do your own editing, and some people use tools like Descript, which are really great. But for me, Pro Tools and then Record Pad has just worked really well for me. It's a lot of fun. So I enjoy it, and that's what I'm doing right now. So next thing is to re-listen to the completed episode. So I want to actually make sure that I listen to the episode, then I'm going to complete it. So I'll export it from Pro Tools at that point. But again, I want to make sure I listen because there have been times where I've overlapped things improperly. So I just go back and sometimes I'll fast forward through it. So if I can see a big chunk where my guest talked for 3 minutes, I'm not going to listen to all that. I'm going to go to the end of it and make sure the transition is good, that I didn't leave a weird space. And I don't do a lot of editing anyway, so this is a pretty quick practice. It takes probably less than 5 minutes to go through a whole episode, even if it's an hour episode, just because I'm going to the points and looking through it to make sure there's nothing that looks strange, because we've all heard podcast episodes where there's a weird gap or a super overlap of people talking. I just want to make sure that doesn't happen at all. All right, the next thing I do is I finalize the episode, and I also the blog post for it and the feed to be used on WordPress and on Buzzsprout. So Buzzsprout is my hosting provider. WordPress is where I actually have my website. So I actually want to finalize the episode title and then the actual description, if you will, or the content that goes along with it. So all the words I'm using to describe that episode, I want to have all that stuff done, get it all finalized, and I right now just have it on a Word doc. So I kind of keep it all right there, all organized and getting it ready to go to WordPress and Buzzsprout. And in a little bit, I'll actually be uploading those. So next thing, going straight into Buzzsprout, I'm going to go ahead and put the title in there, upload the audio, add the description, and then link to the episode blog post where all the rest of the links are. So that's my only link. I do a pretty short description, and then right under it says more, and then has a link to the WordPress blog post, which we'll get into here as well. So before I switch over to WordPress, the next thing I'm actually doing is I'm actually going to determine the times for the soundbite. So I want to actually build out a soundbite for every single episode. So I need to go through and pick that. My team actually builds it. So I just tell them, we use Podcast SOP's comment section for me to be able to be like, hey, here's the time I want to use. And then they'll go do their magic, right? That they do. But I want to at least determine the times of something. I'm like, that's what I want to share in this. And then going over to WordPress now, I'm going to go ahead and use the title, and I'm going to use a template that I have set. So basically, all of my blog posts for podcast episodes look exactly the same. Like if you go to creatingabrand.com/listen, you can just click on any of those, and they all basically look exactly the same. It's just the text changes, and then the links at the bottom change. So I use that template, and I go ahead and just add everything for that specific episode in. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create an image to be used on social media, and which is to promote the episode. So we want to go ahead and build that. And we used Canva as our main tool, which I think most people use, so I didn't even put it in here because, I think most of us are using that. So we just create something with the guest, and we talk about like the link and stuff like that, and we build all that out. And then I leave a little comment in Podcast SOP for what I want to say with the image. So my team isn't just sharing the image, they're also sharing what I want to say. And again, I use the comment section for that, and then they kind of run with it and get it scheduled out there. So the next thing we do is we create the image for the blog post, which is the featured image for it, the social media sharing image, and then the soundbite image. So this is another image that we're doing. So we have multiple things that we're promoting on social media, but we also have one image that we use for everything. So again, it's the blog post, it's the social media, and it's the featured image for the soundbite, and also the cover art for the actual episode itself. I mean, that's just one image, and we make sure it has a big URL that goes to the actual blog post itself. So again, really important for us to be able to do, but we have the team creates that in Canva as well. And the next thing we do is we're actually going to upload those images to the blog post, to Buzzsprout, and then to Buffer to be actually distributed on social media to all the different platforms. And I use the comment section in Podcast SOP to write a little something that goes with that for the social distribution. And Buffer is just the tool that we use to schedule if you're not familiar with it. And that's basically how we kind of organize all that. So if I'm working in advance, which I try to keep my episode 10 weeks ahead, if it's coming out 9 weeks from now, we're using Buffer to schedule those posts. And we have multiple posts throughout a week that are going through, and then one later on, which I'll get into here in a moment. So here's the next thing. We're actually going to finalize all the administrative details, including the metadata in the feed, just with the episode number, like all the little descriptive things that help it from an SEO perspective. And then one of my team members, not me, listens to the final version of the episode that's been uploaded into Buzzsprout. So again, that's our hosting provider that's scheduled on to go live at some point in the future. They're going to re-listen to that whole episode, and they can do it while they're doing something else. They're just looking for like, did Alex miss any cuss words in it? Because we try to keep our podcast E for everyone. So did he miss one? Or is there a weird overlap? Or did something just not upload properly? So they're going through and listening to that. Very rarely do they ever come back, but it gives me peace of mind to know the day it comes out that I edit it, I listen to it, and then a team member also listened to it after it had been uploaded, that we know everything is good with that episode. And the next thing here is to add the featured image to the blog post on WordPress. So again, we built that image that we use everywhere. Now we're going to go over to WordPress. So kind of the flow here is we went over to Buzzsprout and we added the image, and then we checked the audio and all that. And then we go over to WordPress, we add the image, and then we check all the content as well. So they're going to look at the content, make sure there's no spelling errors, because unfortunately, yours truly, Alex Sanfilippo, makes a lot of typos. So they'll go through and check that, and then they also click on all the links to make sure that everything works properly. So again, day of the release, we're not like making sure anything worked. We know everything worked because we did all of our back checking. And that's probably one of my favorite parts of Podcast SOP is the fact that you have all these checks and balances that you can add straight into what you're doing. So anyway, I digress with that. And the last thing we do on WordPress is we actually create a redirect URL for the post itself for that episode, and we use Yoast for this. And basically, I think I'm one of the first people to ever do this. I shared this on stage at a podcasting conference like years ago, and there was like 90 some odd people at this conference. It wasn't huge, and everyone's mind was blown. Everyone went home and did this. Basically, my URLs for the episode are creatingabrand.com/ the episode number that's being released. So it's episode 100, it's /100. The next one's 101, 102. So in the intro and outro, I mentioned, hey, for show notes and for links for resources, go to creatingabrand.com /111 for the links to this episode. Makes it really easy for people to follow. So we always make sure we create that redirect link. So because I've already done the intro and outro and mentioned it, we make sure now that like it's actually there. So when people type it in, it'll send them straight to the right content that they're looking for. All right, and next thing we do is we create the links, the Podcat links, and we update them in the WordPress blog post for the actual episode. So we use Podkite, which helps people just get to the episode to listen to it a lot quicker. So instead of having like a bunch of links on the website of like, here's where you can listen on Spotify, here's where you can listen on Apple, here's all these other players, what we do is we use Podkite, which is actually really intelligent, because if you're looking on your phone, it actually knows which apps you have installed or what you like to use to listen. So you can click on listen to the episode and it'll take you to where you usually like to go, instead of being like, here's 1,000 places. It helps you just get to where you want to go a lot quicker. So we like that, because the idea is, let's get rid of the friction between someone finding the episode and listening to the episode, right? Like, we want it to be as quick as possible. So Podkite has been able to help us with that. So we create those links inside there and we add all those to the blog post as well. Now, because we have it templated out, we already build the links in automatically. We just go to Podkite afterwards and update those links on their system so that it mirrors to our website. Sounds kind of technical, but works the same way as a redirect link that we do after I've already done my intro and outro and talked about that redirect link. This is just something you go back and do later. If anyone needs help on that, feel free to reach out. I can explain it. It's actually a really simple process and almost fully automated. All right. And then I record a thank you video for the guest. And I don't see very many people do this. So what I do is I'll actually take my phone and I will just do a little selfie video. Like usually here in the studio, I'll just be like, hey, thank you so much for being a guest. The episode's now live. And it always comes from the heart. I do it every single time. Some people like to do it in a way that is more scalable. So they'll just do one general video of like, hey, thank you, Mr. or Mrs. Guest. You rock. You know, like someone will do something more like that. Mine are individual. I talk about something that I really admire about them or some other conversation we had. Again, I'm building that rapport with that guest. And I'm happy to say with most of my guests that have been on my show, it's been over 150 of them, most of them still are in communication with me. So I send that short thank you video along with a little email, but that's scheduled out. So my team, again, using that podcast SOP, tells me, hey, Alex, we need the video, we need the text, and then we'll get it scheduled. So the morning of the podcast getting released, they're actually seeing that. And then next up is to manually message friends in common with the guest on LinkedIn. So my audience is on LinkedIn. This is where we might differ a little bit. You might not use LinkedIn to find your audience, and that's perfectly fine. You might be going somewhere else. Go where your audience is, not where you like to be. So just because you think Instagram's fun, don't spend all your time on Instagram. If your audience is in a Facebook group, go to the Facebook group. So what I do is I actually just click on that guest if they have a LinkedIn, and most of them do because I'm in the entrepreneurship space, and I'll just hit friends in common. That's a button there. And sometimes if the guest isn't very big, there's one or two of them, and that's fine. I'll message them, and it's unique. Like, I'm not just going like, listen to this. Paste, right? Like, I'm actually writing up being like, hey, I just posted about this episode. It's our mutual friend so-and-so. And if they're not very big, I'll be like, hey, they don't have like a huge following on here. Would you mind sharing it with some people you know that would really benefit from it? And here's a link to the post. And I just link to my actual LinkedIn post about the episode, not to the episode off of LinkedIn. That way keeps people on LinkedIn. It boosts some engagement. Now, some of my guests, they have a really big following. So for them, I'm not sending out to like 300 people. I'm just picking some that seem interesting. Like, I look at their skills and be like, hey, I see you do this. We talked about that in this episode. Just check this out. That practice takes about 20 minutes or something like that, but that is really the biggest form of marketing I do for my show, and has actually led to more growth than anything else. Now, again, it might not work for you, but find a way to get creative like that, and don't be spammy, but find a way that can really serve and help people. One other thing I want to mention real quick is the size of the guest or the influence of the guest has no correlation with number of downloads. So me getting the most famous person in the world to talk about leadership versus the person who knows the most about leadership that no one's ever heard of, there is no difference in the amount of downloads that are going to come from that. And if you think otherwise, I'm telling you that's not how podcasting works. You might get a organic spike if you have like a Matthew McConaughey on your podcast, because people want to hear Matthew McConaughey, but the next week they will spike right back down because people were there for him, not for your podcast. So overall podcast growth is not determined by how big the name of the guest is. It's about how good the content is. So keep that in mind. So don't just say, well, Alex, I'm only going to have huge guests on my show. It's not going to work. It doesn't make a big show. What makes a big show is having the right person there. Anyway, another side rant. Can't help it. I love podcasting. I love teaching people how to podcast better. The next thing we do is we create a 6-month in the future post about the episode. So my team has multiple posts going out that first and second week of the show, like all those different images we made, the little bit of text that I've come up with. And then we do something else 6 months in the future. We post about that episode again. And it's just me. I'll pre-write this. So in the comment section of that task in our SOP, on Podcast SOP, I'll just write something in and be like, hey, this was so impactful. Just want to remind everybody about this episode. If you haven't heard it, go back and check it out. Something like that. They'll schedule it through Buffer once again. 6 months later, that will come back up. And we'll see what kind of traction we get from that. If it spikes at all, if it does, then we'll talk about the episode even a little bit more on our social media in real time at that point. The next thing I do is, because, again, I'm doing my own editing. I mentioned those WAV or WAV folders, whatever they are, or files, and I have it in Pro Tools. I've got all this all these files now, right? I don't know about you, but like my computer doesn't have like multiple terabytes of space. So what I do is I actually upload everything to OneDrive, and that's an important practice because I've had my computer fill up before while I'm doing something important, and you don't want that to happen. So what I got in the habit of doing is just uploading all of it to my OneDrive and then removing it from my actual PC, which yes, I use a PC. So whatever file storage thing you use, make sure that you're really careful that you don't ever fill up your computer. And if you're podcasting, over time, it's going to become quite a bit. So I make sure that none of these files are stored on my computer. They're all uploaded to the cloud somewhere where they're safer than my computer and where I can access them if I need them. The next thing I do is, again, I'm all about building that relationship with the guest. So I actually leave a video review for the guest's book on Amazon. So if applicable, of course. Most of my guests have books because I find that authors can really articulate well on one given topic because they wrote about it. So if they did that, I'll actually leave a video review. So I actually use this background, this same setup where this text is at. I actually have a picture of the book come up, and I just talk about my experience with reading it and then being on my show. It does three things actually. One, gives them a great review and builds some rapport with them. Two, it helps other people know if they can get the book. And three, it drives people to my podcast. They're like, oh man, this Alex guy interviewed him and he gave me an episode number. Like, yeah, I'm going to go check it out. So it's a great way to do some marketing and also add some value to somebody else. The next thing I do is I leave a review on their podcast. Again, building that relationship if they have one. Not all of them have one. If they do have their own podcast, I'm going to leave a listen and then I'm going to leave a review on it. And I encourage you to do the same again. Again, it's just a small value-adding thing. And the last thing I do here with the guests is I add them to Connection Fox, which is a program I use to be able to manage my contacts and stay in touch with people. I like to follow up with them about every 90 days and just say, hey, thanks again for being a guest. How are things? Anything I can do to help you out and return the favor. I like to do that because I think it's a really important way to build that rapport with the guest. I've had so many of them reshare the episode even 90 days later or 180 days later because I reach back out to them. So they're still sharing about it. And I think that's a really great way to, again, build that rapport, but also get your episode information out there. And that is my entire SOP. That's all 29 tasks that we do. This is what we found really works for the Creating a Brand podcast. I'm seeing month after month after month growth since we launched, and it's been fantastic. Like, we're doing really well, impacting a lot of people. So I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out. Podcast SOP is a game changer for being able to manage this properly. Podmatch is the right way to find guests, and you're not wasting your time. And I'm telling you, if you do these things and you find a way to tweak it a little bit for yourself, you're going to be set up for a lot of success with podcasting. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it.